Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today I have a very special guest for you. His name is Tim Prindle. Tim is the co-president and CEO of Bay Vanguard Bank. Welcome to the show, Tim. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Otto.
Of course. Well, obviously, everyone knows what a bank is, but if you want to do a general overview, Tim, as far as who is Bay Vanguard Bank?
Sure. Bay Vanguard Bank is a community bank based out of Baltimore, serving the state of Maryland, and then in certain product types we go across the country. Bay Vanguard would be differentiated from some of the banks you may be familiar with in that it's a community bank, meaning we really have a more local touch to the communities we serve, whether that be a geographical community or in regards to commercial real estate. There's certain communities in the real estate spectrum that maybe go across the country that we also serve with a more hands-on approach than you would receive at a larger financial institution.
That's interesting. Once I hear commercial real estate, already my antennas prop up. So commercial real estate, so for geography, are you specifically a certain asset class you guys like to go into?
So within business banking, putting consumer on the side for a second, we have two major divisions. One would be community banking, and that's more geographically focused. So we have a branch network that spans from Dorchester County up through Harford County, 16 branch locations, and that team is handling the real estate, commercial real estate needs in those communities, whether that's for investment purpose, whether that's for owner-occupied businesses, and then all other types of business financing, equipment, business acquisition, working capital, all of those needs. So that's one division. A separate division would be our national investment real estate team. So that team goes across the country, lending across asset classes, but the primary asset class is net lease.
Got it. Okay. All net lease, and it can be retail, medical, or is there a specific?
It's across the different subsectors within net lease. Coming out of the pandemic, we were very heavy in the quick service restaurant industry. So McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, those brands across the country. But we've done everything from medical office, industrial on a net lease basis, across the board. Okay,
that's good to know. I'm actually working on a LabCorp net lease sale right now, so that's why it just crossed my mind, medical. But okay, that's good. So let me take it all the way back though before I sort of got sidetracked with commercial real estate. Are you originally from around the area here, the Maryland area?
I am not. Southern California, a town by the name of Yorba Linda, about halfway between LA and San Diego.
It must be beautiful.
It is beautiful. I get the question sometimes, why do you leave? Why'd you leave? And I find Maryland to be equally beautiful. I mean, you could be out on the Appalachian Trail one weekend, on the Chesapeake Bay the next. So both, I've been spoiled. I've had great places to live in my life.
Yeah. So you grew up in Southern California all throughout childhood?
I did. First 18 years of my life before moving out to Maryland.
So growing up in Southern California, Tim, what were you into? What were some of your things that you liked?
I would say a pretty typical childhood. Revolved the normal things kids would be doing, playing around the neighborhood. We had a great group of kids in the neighborhood. Sports throughout my youth and into high school and college. Middle class family, great neighborhood in Yorba Linda.
Okay. Back then, growing up, were you thinking of banking?
No, I think my parents would probably have said I had some propensity probably in that direction, little business ventures from time to time around the neighborhood. So always maybe business focused at an early age, but no, I was not someone that at an early age kind of had a plan laid out as to where I was going in life.
Sure. So growing up, you had a couple businesses as a child?
I did. So, I mean, very young, I would have been the one that was probably trying to get a couple lawns in the neighborhood to mow. A little later in my life, I had a personal training type business, and that's all pre my career. But yeah, a handful of small things. That business may be an overstatement, but little hobbies, or now maybe side hustle is the word, I guess, that gets thrown around now for those type of
yeah. No, but that's good. You even had sort of those sort of entrepreneurial business tendencies growing up. That's what I see a lot with some of our business guests we have, is there was always some kind of inclination in childhood that they were dabbling on some things.
I find community banking being a great fit for that mindset. I think a lot of people have that inclination. One question I get asked sometimes is about hiring, particularly people right out of college now into the industry. I think a lot of people have some part of them that has that entrepreneurial spirit, and community banking is an interesting way to explore that aspect of you, because unlike very large organizations, you can have impact, and your ideas are listened to very early in your career. And I've enjoyed community banking. I'm sure we'll go through my career probably, but I think community banking has let that aspect of me play out in a large degree.
I agree. I think there's a totally different feel with a community bank compared to the huge conglomerates, the Wells, the B of A, and so on. It's a very different relationship with the community.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So you mentioned college. Did you also stay in Southern California for school?
I did not. I originally attended the United States Naval Academy here in Annapolis, not far from where I am now in Baltimore. So I played football for Coach Johnson there, but I was 18 and immature, and he told me I was a defensive end. I thought I was a linebacker, and ended up ultimately at University of Delaware.
Okay. What did you major there in Delaware?
I was a finance major.
Okay. I'm curious. I know you were always interested in business growing up. Is that the reason why finance, or what was your thought as far as selecting that major back then?
I wish I don't know if I wish is the right word, but sometimes I think to myself, it should have been more planned than it was. But I was originally going to be an engineering major, and when we were deciding at the Naval Academy, a lot of my teammates were either economics or political science. I was more interested in economics at the time, so I took that path. And at some point, I read something that said finance was a promising career, and I just kind of, by happen chance more than anything else, I think went through that course in my collegiate experience.
Yeah, that's a great career. I majored in economics.
Okay.
And I think this was pre-internet as far as what you can research. And I remember going to my high school library and just looking to biographies of business people. And, back then, there were not all these there were some business books, but the majority were either, from my recollection, Donald Trump, of course, and many of his books, or Warren Buffett. And there was many books written in regards to Warren Buffett. So I looked at both of them, and there was a few others, and I saw Trump was, okay, econ major, and then Buffett, also econ major. I'm like, okay, maybe econ major.
Right. It's really funny hearing how that plays out in people's lives, how they make that decision.
Yeah. So you graduated from Delaware, and what happens next?
So in my senior year at University of Delaware, my financial role model would have been my grandfather. So I kind of had a Jack Bogle, Vanguard, Vanguard being the investment company, mindset that I was going to go to Vanguard and work in kind of index funds, passive index funds, just because my grandfather was a big proponent of that way of thinking. And then this was the 2008 Great Recession timeframe. And the world was falling apart in banking, and I had an individual in one of my group assignments that got a job with the Office of Thrift Supervision in bank regulation, and they were explaining to me that they were going to be going to these different banks and reviewing them and trying to understand whether they were safe and sound. And it seemed very interesting at the time because every headline you were reading about was kind of in that same genre. So I asked that individual if they would talk to the people they interviewed with to see if they would interview someone else, and they were willing to. And that's where I started my career at a University of Delaware, was with the Office of Thrift Supervision, which is is within the Treasury Department, or was, now it's part of the Office of Comptroller of Currency.
Okay, and they're located in Delaware?
So the Office of Thrift Supervision, now the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, they regulate banks across the country, but I was regulating banks in the DC and Baltimore markets.
Okay, okay. Would you have to travel from Delaware down here?
So this is after graduating Delaware. So when I graduated Delaware, I moved to Annapolis. When I was at the Naval Academy, there was a program called the Sponsor Family Program, where the Naval Academy pairs you up with a local family, so you can kind of have a family experience still, even though you're far away from home. So there's a great family, the Erlocks in Annapolis, that they were my sponsor parents during my time at the academy. So when I ended up graduating and getting a job in the area, I moved in with them while I was, figuring things out in regards to housing. So that's where I resided after Delaware.
Okay, I see. But most of the family for you, Tim, is still in Southern California, right?
So my mother and father still live in Southern California, and I have a younger brother who has the brains in the family. He's MIT undergrad and grad in computer science, and he works for Google out of San Francisco.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so in Maryland, there was really no family then when you moved from Delaware back to Maryland?
No, not at that point. Yeah.
Okay. And how long were you in that role for there?
I spent approximately 2 years at the Office of Thrift Supervision, and it was just a great learning experience. I'd be a big promoter of anyone that's interested in banking, starting with a regulatory body. The training programs were great, the people were great, and you got so much exposure as opposed to working on a narrow assignment. You got to go into various financial institutions, look at various aspects of them, and you're usually dealing with the senior management of those organizations because regulation is just such an important part of our industry.
Sure. So you're traveling all across Maryland, visiting all these banks, right?
Exactly, Maryland and DC. And then I got some special assignments that took me out to California as well.
Okay. And then from there, you decided, let me go into actually working for the banks?
Yeah, so the Office of Thrift Supervision, coming out of the Great Recession, was merging into the Office of Comptroller of Currency. And there was a little question of what that really meant to the people that were at the Office of Thrift Supervision. So I had an opportunity to leave and work for General Electric Capital Corporation as a consultant. And I was doing that while an institution in Maryland reached out to me to ask if I would consult them, a very small community bank. And we use this term community banks, and there's various sizes of these community banks. So this particular one was a very small community bank. At the time when it started, it was 2 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees when I got involved with them. And I started consulting them and trying to assist them in modernizing some of their practices. And that bank was Whole Federal Savings Bank. It was a row home on Whole Street in Locust Point, if you're familiar with the various neighborhoods of Baltimore City. And that bank, through partnering with a lot of other smaller community banks, is now what is Bay Vanguard Bank, essentially.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So to give you a little perspective, so that goes back to about 2010 when there's 2 full-time, 2 part-time employees at Whole with about 20 million in assets under management. And now today we're approximately 100 employees with about $800 million under management.
Tremendous growth. So you started with them, Tim, as a consultant at first, right?
Correct.
And then what made you sort of change roles there and become full-time?
Yeah, so I was burning the candle from both ends. I was working at General Electric Capital Corporation for the majority of the week, and then I was working nights and weekends consulting Whole Federal Savings Bank. And in some point in that process, not too far in, the board of Whole Federal Savings Bank asked me to come on as their co-president, or at that time, just sole president and CEO of the organization. And then that bank, not too far thereafter, merged with a bank by the name of Copernic Bank, which was based in more Fells Canton area. And since then, there's been over 10 different community banks that have merged together to create what's Bay Vanguard.
Wow. So you started with that position and role then as CEO, president?
I did. That was my first role in banking. Yeah.
You know, when people hear banking, you know, they picture the big banks. They don't picture the community banks. And as you said, there's even in community bank sector different sizes. How was that coming in as a, you know, this is your first role in banking, and now you're the president and CEO?
I found it extremely exciting, and I think being an entrepreneur, being naive in certain respects may provide some benefit. I mean, if you knew everything that would have had to fall into place in a large part, maybe by luck, and how much work it would have done to build this, along with a great team, you would have said the risk was maybe high in accomplishing all of that. So I was probably somewhat naive to what it would take, and what I made up for knowledge, I probably compensated with just excitement and a willingness to work hard, and it all worked out. So I can be happy about that.
Sure. When you come into this role, Tim, you're around what age?
So I would have been early 20s.
Okay. So you're in your early 20s, CEO of the bank, and I guess first order of agenda is what? Bring in more money to the bank, or what's first order of business? Do you remember?
So at that time, this was approximately 2.5 years coming out of the Great Recession. This bank had a lot of problem loans. Okay. The president at that time was a gentleman, Mike Bauman, who's just a great person. The highest character type person you could ever come across. And he extended credit to a lot of people trying to help them in certain situations. And there was a handful of loans that just didn't end up working out, going through one of the worst recessions that our country's ever went through. And so at the beginning, it was just stabilizing the bank, working through problem assets, and modernizing the way they did a lot of activities. And then I had a big learning curve transitioning from regulation into actually running the business. There's a lot of things that you don't understand when you're just reviewing an organization, as opposed to actually trying to get in there and implement and get things done. So that was my first couple of years within Whole Federal Savings Bank.
How was the implementation process, the operating of the business once you're in that role?
It went well. The implementation went well overall. It was a lot of just working through issues. So you were just working through issues at that time, and then kind of creating where you wanted to go. So you had some time as you're working through issues to kind of set forth a strategic plan for what you wanted to do after you worked through the issues at hand.
You mentioned during this time, I believe you said there was at least 10, either acquisitions, partnerships with other financial institutions, right?
Correct.
Now, how does that come about as far as looking into possibly acquiring or merging with another bank?
So coming out of so I would say there's been different phases of it, but coming out of the Great Recession, there were a lot of institutions that felt that due to their size, they couldn't handle the increased regulatory requirements. There was also a theme of meeting the technological requirements that clients wanted them to have. So there was an underlying wind that was helping kind of push some of these organizations to wanting to partner together. So that theme was a win that kind of pushed certain organizations to wanting to do this. And I was just very lucky at being at the right place in the right time, and maybe with some regulatory skill sets to understand how to accomplish those regulatory requirements that allowed allowed organizations to want to partner with us.
Okay. I don't know if much of our audience is familiar a little bit as far as how the bank or the banking model works, as far as obviously bringing in deposits from the consumer and then lending on those deposits to, like you mentioned, local businesses, real estate, or whatever it may be. How do you go about obviously getting the word out there for the community to come in and bring the deposits to the bank?
So one thing that we inherited in that regard is many of our organizations have tremendous brands within their communities already. So in Baltimore, but in Maryland in general, these community banks go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of them were kind of ethnic-based organizations where Whole Federal Savings Bank was basically the bank for German immigrants at the time, and Copernic would have been one for Polish immigrants, and there was a Kosciuszko in St. Casimir. So generations of family members have banked with some of these banks, and these banks have done tremendous things for their communities throughout time. And that was a huge asset that was just inherited by partnering together with these organizations. And then I would say outside of that, there hasn't been what we would consider a large marketing effort. It's just been executing well for clients and word of mouth. So a lot of our legacy business has been more consumer, and a lot of our marginal new business has been more on the business side. And on the business side, it's amazing how much additional business you can get if you just serve one client well, you focus on them and do a good job for them, and they will let their friends know, and all of a sudden your phone rings regularly.
Yeah, that's very true. Your headquarters in Baltimore, correct?
Correct.
And you mentioned you have about 16 branches?
Correct.
How has COVID, how has the pandemic affected?
Yeah, so obviously from a health perspective, it's been challenging a lot of our team members, and it's just been a hard thing for us all to go through as a country. In regards to what you were talking about, our 16 branches, if you think about the idea that we've merged a lot of banks together, well, each one of those banks had headquarters buildings and excess space relative to what we needed, but we never disposed of a lot of that real estate. So we had the luxury going through the pandemic of having a lot of excess space, which had allowed for us to create a very socially distanced environment within our real estate network. And that was a great benefit to us going through the pandemic. And it's nice now that we're coming out at what appears to be the tail end of this experience.
Yeah. When the pandemic started, Tim, did things slow down as far as business for the bank? And how are things now compared to how it was a year and a half, 2 years ago when it started?
So I would say the pandemic for the banking industry, in certain ways, created a lot more opportunity to serve our clients. So one was the PPP programs, which I'm guessing I know your listenership's a lot of businesses, and PPP seems to touch basically every business. So that was a tremendous amount of work. I could not be more proud of the team. It was great to be able to be part of the solution as a banking industry and supporting businesses and getting them the capital they needed to continue to employ their teams. And that took a tremendous amount of effort, and our team did a phenomenal job in that regard. So that kept us very busy. In addition to that, there was just a lot of change in operations. Like, how did you manage everything from a personnel standpoint, technology, et cetera, going through the pandemic? And then on our national IRE platform, a lot of providers of capital, banks, pulled back significantly on their lending efforts as COVID was kicking off, not really knowing what the future was going to hold. And very early on, we made a commitment, particularly in the net lease space, that we were going to push through, particularly in the quick service restaurant industry where we served a lot of clients. So that was a very busy time where we had a lot of lenders that were backing out of the space, and we were going in more heavily into the space at that time. And through that, we're able to serve a lot of our existing clients and build a lot of new relationships. I've always been a big believer, particularly as a banker, when a client has a need, that's the time you want to get on the phone and call them. I mean, it's always good to check in, but you really need to be there for them in their time of need.
Yeah, I like how during COVID, there was also a lot of growth. And you know what's interesting, Tim, what I'm coming to see is that a lot of these community banks, when it comes to the PPP, a lot of the national players did a lot of things wrong from what I understand. And the community banks just stepped in, which I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, I've heard that same theme, and I've heard that from clients. And I think the national banks, they do well at certain things, and community banks do well in certain things. I think there's places for both types of organizations within our economy. But I think a lot of PPP had to do with being nimble and getting things going quickly, and national banks aren't necessarily structured to do that, where a lot of the community banks were able to jump in much more quickly, and they had more intimate relationships with their clients, and they were able to move much more quickly to get them the money quickly, which they needed at the time. Timing was very important.
Yeah, I clearly remember now that I'm thinking about it, having a conversation with clients and talking to the business owners, and they're telling me that XYZ Bank, without naming names, hasn't responded to them, and there's nothing. And then they're seeing this other entrepreneur getting money and funding from your local community bank. And I'm like, you do not go to the community ones. And then that's where the results were coming in.
Yes.
That's good.
It is.
With the local business community, whether real estate or just the business part, as far as lending is concerned, because a lot of our listeners are local business owners here in the Maryland area as well, is there any specific criteria requirements that you folks are looking for?
I would say relative to financial institutions, we look at it more on a case-by-case institution. So there are general requirements that are kind of out there, whether you're in a financial situation in which you're ready for a bank loan. But we really look at each situation individually and try to figure out, can we structure something that's mutually beneficial for the client and the bank? So we tend not to like the worksheet approach where, sorry, your debt service coverage ratio isn't sufficient, you can't get a loan, etc. We like to spend the time, and we have a flat organization in that there's very little bureaucracy within our organization. So your request will become before someone that has the authority to make that decision, and they'll look at the whole picture in making that decision.
That's great. Talking specifically here about business lending, is there certain industries that you prefer or not prefer to go into?
I think there's some industries that maybe are easier and less easy to underwrite, but when we're serving a community is supported by a large spectrum of businesses, and there's not a certain group of those businesses that we disqualify from our lending efforts. Now, for example, going through the pandemic, if you were a sit-down restaurant, you may be looked at in a different way than if you were a quick service restaurant, because at that time it was different. But we financed both types of organizations going through the pandemic. It just, how we look at that organization at any point in time may be different based on what we think about the future of the industry. But outside of that, we try to serve every industry within the community.
Okay. I love that. Now, when it comes to business, is it pretty much, I know for the commercial real estate arm, net lease nationwide, but for the community, is it all Maryland that you focus on, or certain geographic areas within the state?
In the community banking effort, it's Maryland, and by the fact that we have geographical presence in certain markets, most of the focus is in those markets. We're very relational. Our relationship managers are meeting with them, and they know those local businesses, and that's more of probably the focus. But we serve that community banking throughout the state of Maryland. Okay,
that's good to know. What would you say, Tim, that drives and motivates you?
I enjoy it. I enjoy what I do. I never feel like there's something that I need to get myself excited about. It's natural. It's very natural for me to be excited to come into work every day. I love our team members, our clients, and I enjoy banking. I enjoy having someone, a business, a nonprofit that wants to accomplish something, but their gap is they need to find resources to get that done, and to be able to partner with them and figure out how to, in a risk acceptable way, provide them the resources to accomplish what they're trying to do. I just enjoy it. So I guess I just enjoy the innate aspect of what banking is.
Tim, I love that. Can you go a little bit more into detail? Because, you know, when you're coming in as a 20-year-old with a handful of employees to where you are now with over 100 plus team members, you as an individual, as a person, have to evolve with everything, whether managerial, leadership. How have you personally seen yourself evolve from where you were then to where you are now in your role?
Yeah. So I refer to it as dynamic leadership. The idea that a leader doesn't put his innate personality within the organization, but really looks at the organization and says, how can I serve the organization where it is in its life cycle? So early on at Whole Federal Savings Bank, and then into the early days of Copernic, there was a lot of just rolling up the sleeves and figuring out how to do nuanced aspects of banking, and as nuanced as getting the shovel out and clearing the parking lot. There's just that aspect of it. And now as the organization's grown, it's a lot more about team building, supporting the team, working with the head of our investment real estate team, community banking, figuring out, can we streamline a process somewhere? What do you need to help your team? And there's more of that aspect to the leadership role now, as opposed to when the bank started.
Sure. Now, was all this innate in you, or did you go into some classes or training or reading as far as evolving the career through time?
No classes. I enjoy reading, so I read a lot and on a broad spectrum of things. So, various, I love biographies and thinking, seeing what other people have done and trying to apply that. And then just a tremendous amount of mentors throughout my career. So when we did the Whole Federal Savings Bank Copernic merger, we shared the co-president and CEO role with a gentleman, Gary Amrine, who was the president of Copernic Bank. And he was a career banker and had a lot more experience than I did. And he showed me a tremendous amount. And now I've got another co-president, Dave Flair, who has a tremendous depth and breadth of experience that I've learned a tremendous amount about, and so many people throughout. There's been wonderful attorneys. There's a gentleman that no longer practices, Chuck Rogers, who taught me a tremendous amount. So I think a general theme coming out of it is if you have a willingness and you want to learn something and you're willing to work hard, there's people out there that will kind of show you the details, how you put it together.
Yeah. We were just talking about your 100+ member team here. And, I think surrounding yourself with the right team is imperative and very important. How do you go about finding the right people, putting the right people in the right seats in the bus to move it forward?
Yeah, that is certainly, I would say that's probably the biggest component of leadership, is getting the right people on the bus as you described it. And I think that's twofold. One, you need to have an organization that attracts people onto that bus. So, and there's many aspects of that. I think in the community banking space, part of it's just telling the right story. So I think a lot of people want to be part of an organization where their voice is heard. They get to have an impact on decisions in the direction of an organization. And Bay Vanguard Bank's that kind of organization. So I think by having that, you are able to attract the people that you want. And you want those kind of people. You want people that take great ownership over what they're doing within the organization. And I think it's a positively revolving cycle, in that if you create a culture that allows for that, it attracts the people that want to do that. And that's ultimately what you want as an organization to serve your clients as well.
That's great. Tim, you growing the bank from 20 million where you started to over 800 million in assets under management now, and also just dealing day to day with local business owners and entrepreneurs. What do you think are some key traits that come out to you as far as what you see the successful business owner do?
Sure. And just to reiterate on the previous point, you said you grew the business. Like to your earlier point, there's a big team that's grown the business. And but to your question about what are some of the traits that successful business owners, what themes have I seen in that regard? I would say focus is a big part of that. The people that have done the best in the industry that I've seen, they know everything about their industry. They have a great focus as to what the details of their particular industry is. There is usually a theme of hard work. These successful organizations don't come about by chance. It takes a lot of work to create that. And I would say the highest level of character in many of them. Now you see some that don't, and they usually go up and then they blow up. But a lot of business has to do with relationships. And Maryland, Baltimore, these are small communities in which your reputation goes with you. And the people that I've seen do well over a long period of time have the highest character.
Yeah, those are all very true and great points. And I love the first one, focus, because you see a lot of times people dabbling in this or that or trying this, and that's great. You should try things to maybe find your path and hopefully find the right path there. But if you're dabbling in all this and not focusing on one thing, eventually, I don't know how the growth is going to come.
Right. And you bring up a good point about dabbling in things. Okay. And there needs to be an aspect of that, I think, as you grow an organization, but then also know where your competency is, know where that circle of competency is, such that you know where you're dabbling and you know where you actually have the understanding, and maybe in that area you're dabbling, you'll create an understanding over time. But knowing that, particularly in the industries that we work in, real estate, I often see the person that thought they were, and maybe they were very good at multifamily, now they think hospitality is where the opportunity is going to be. And they go into that, and it's very different, and they don't understand that until they're into something that maybe didn't make sense for them to get into.
That's true. Are there any specific habits or traits that you have, Tim, that you use day to day that have helped you personally or in business? I
can't think of any particular habit or trait. I we talked about the idea of naturally enjoying it. So I read a tremendous amount about it. I think a lot about banking, and when I think of I guess maybe that the habit is the right word, but it comes very naturally. I just spend a lot of time focusing on banking and how to best provide banking services to clients, and I think that drives a lot of the success that I've had in my career.
When you mentioned reading, is it industry reading periodicals that you read, or is it books, or?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the above. I could pivot this and show the bookshelf maybe, but yeah, it's a wide range of topics, because in the banking industry, you're dealing with a wide range of businesses, and to understand, you're never going to understand the business as well as the person that is the operator of that business, but to understand the general principles of various businesses. Banking touches almost everything within our economy, and things that even beyond the economy, just into public policy, et cetera. So having a broad understanding of all of that's very helpful. And I don't know how you would do that without reading a lot.
That's true. What would you say is your biggest challenge at Bay Vanguard Bank today?
I would say the biggest challenge is to continue to, well, I break it into twofold. There's certain challenges that are constant challenges. I'll put cybersecurity into that bucket. Cybersecurity is always changing. You're always having to keep abreast of what's going on, deploying resources into it just to make sure customer information, et cetera, is safe at all times. So there's those kind of challenges. And then the other challenge is, I think, to just continue to build the team. And that's not a challenge in the sense that there's any particular item that makes it difficult, other than when you're growing as fast as we are, there's just a constant bringing in new people and trying to train them on your culture to do things the way that has made the bank successful in the past.
You know, when you mention cyber, you wouldn't think how cyber not only, I think it affects everyone, not only banking institutions. I was having a conversation, a dental practice, several locations all in Maryland, and cyber threat. They were holding their information, their patient's information, basically for ransom, and wanted a payoff. And I would have never thought, having a conversation with this doctor, a dental practice, and it is just crazy, but that is very important for all types of businesses, not just a financial institution.
Certainly, and banks in a certain respect have become, advisor would be too strong of a word, but we have a component in that with our businesses, because now more than ever, businesses want access to banking services digitally. So businesses are entering into our ecosystem via technology. And one way for them to get us and them into trouble is by having problems within their systems. So we're constantly trying to educate businesses as to the appropriate ways to manage their infrastructure to protect not only them, but that ultimately protects us as well.
That's great that you do that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your banking career?
That's a very interesting question. And I think I'm going to go back to the other statements that we made earlier. I think I'm glad I didn't know what I didn't know back then, because if you did, I think it would have seemed overwhelming at the time. So I think constant learning is going to be part of any success in life. So the fact that there were certain things I didn't know, I think is just part of the process.
Yeah, that's true. You know, a lot of times I hear is like, if I would have known how hard it would have been to do this, I don't know if I would have done it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment.
You just mentioned the word success now, Tim, and I just thought about it. The word success for you, is there any specific meaning, or what do you think of something or a person when you think of success?
Yeah, at this point, I think of success as the concept of if you could have all of our team members report out anonymously, is Tim really helping me become a better contributor to the organization, fulfilling, what I want to do in my career? That's kind of, and I don't know if you can ever get that data unfiltered back to you, but that's what I view as success at this point, is trying to empower the team members to accomplish what they want in their careers, and by doing so, serve the clients in the process.
I like that. You mentioned earlier, as far as mentors and a former co-president and your current co-president, are they any other mentors that come to mind? And if so, what did you learn from them?
So in that term mentor, I've never had a formal mentorship type relationship that I can think of. But yeah, the number of mentors have been endless within my career. So net lease, there's certain people in the real estate industry that I've learned tremendous amounts in net lease, or leadership, or law. So yeah, I think surrounding yourself, whether that be within your business or in your greater network, with people that you admire, is infinitely important to growing your understanding of topics and the world at large.
I like how you basically surrounding yourself with other professionals and leaders with experience that you can learn from.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. There's so much that doesn't end up in the books, that you only learn through cultivating relationships with people, having the curiosity to ask the questions, and yeah, at this point, I'm much more likely to pick up a phone and call someone, and when I'm interested in some nuance to an aspect of an industry or what's going on in public policy, et cetera, to understand it.
What does the future look for you and for Bay Vanguard Bank in the next couple of years? What's the vision?
Yeah, so we continue to do more of the same to a large extent. So we hope to, as opportunities present themselves, continue to expand our geographical presence, serve more communities, and continue to provide whatever the future needs are for those businesses and other organizations. And we focus most of our conversation on the business side of it based on your listenership, but there's a whole consumer aspect of our business, and as those worlds change, payments is an industry that's changing a lot, and we'll continue to try to stay at the forefront of providing the clients what they want in all those different aspects of banking.
I'm glad you just mentioned the consumer now, Tim. Is most of the customer base, is it just consumer, or is it business, or how does that look like?
So it's pretty evenly split. So a lot of our marginal new growth has been business, but overall our portfolio of relationships is pretty evenly split between consumer and business. And when I say business, I use that broadly to also include nonprofit, government organizations, et cetera. And on the consumer side, we offer everything you would expect from a financial institution. Financing for buying homes, boats, cars, personal type loans, all the banking services that you would want, every type of depository account, mobile banking, et cetera. We have it all here at Bay Vanguard.
Do you foresee the future continuing with other banking mergers or acquisitions, or more just growing organically, or both?
I think you pursue both. I think mergers, I don't think you want to be overly focused on having to get mergers done. I think that gets you in trouble. So you want to have organic growth and always support that. And at the same time, when opportunities present themselves to merge with other organizations, be ready to do that and be able to do that in a way that creates value for the combined organization.
Sure. On the merger side of things, do you still see just remaining a Maryland-based bank, or do you see maybe expanding Pennsylvania, Delaware, other states, or elsewhere?
So we are open to expanding beyond Maryland if the right opportunity presented itself. Our most recent announcement, we just announced that we're going to be merging with North Arundel Federal Savings Bank. They're a community bank based out of Pasadena, Maryland. So that's our most recent announcement. It'll be, I think, a very good combination between our two organizations. Mickey Thomas has ran that organization for some period of time. I've watched her do a tremendous job within that organization, but it's just another example of a smaller organization that feels the pressures of not having the scale to provide some of the technology, some of the process required from a regulatory perspective, and partnering together to continue to serve their clients. And I know just from hearing, some of their clients are excited about the concept that we're going to be able to offer more services and larger loans to be able to service their needs.
From the broad scope of things, Tim, how many community banks are in the state of Maryland, roughly?
That's a somewhat hard question to answer based on how many banks you're going to qualify as community banks and non-community banks. So it would be hard to put a number on that without an exact definition of community bank.
So you personally, when you think of community bank, are you thinking of assets under $1 billion, under $3 billion, over $5 billion?
Yeah, I would say that general term community bank would fall into all of those different criteria.
Okay.
And I would, like we talked about earlier, I think there's different subgroups within community bank. I differentiate community bank as a financial institution that has local decision making, that is able to not have overly bureaucratic process to coming to decisions, and supports a community. Communities can be geographically focused, or they can be focused on some other aspect of bringing different people and organizations together. But that's how I view community banking versus regional or national banking.
Okay. I guess you pretty much have your hands full, though, if you want to continue to expand on the acquisition side, just focusing on local Maryland community banks in different sizes, of course. Right?
There's not an infinite number of community banks. So, and there used to be more de novo banks. A de novo bank is a new bank that's been created. We haven't seen a robust de novo bank market. But as we talked about before, the bank, if serving clients well, should be able to organically grow. And if opportunities present themselves on the merger front and they make sense, then we would love to participate in those. And if that doesn't happen, we're also fine just continuing forward with the organic growth that we've had, historically.
Sure. Last question, Tim. When you're not busy with the bank, what do you like to do for fun?
I have a beautiful wife and 3 children, and I spend a lot of time at the bank, and I love that. And I try not to have too many activities on my plate. So if I'm not here at the bank, I'm probably doing something with my wife and 3 children, whether that's out on the sailboat, out on the Appalachian Trail. My children are young, 6 years old on the oldest one, on the youngest. They're getting into sports. I'm having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, if I'm not here at the bank, I'm probably out with them somewhere.
So 6 is your oldest?
Correct.
Oh, you have your hands full. I have 3 boys, and
yes,
my youngest turned 5, my oldest is 10.
Okay.
Yeah, those are fun times.
Yeah, I might be adding you to that network then to get some advice on parenting. It sounds like you're a few steps ahead of me. So
Yeah, anytime. Tim, if people want to find out more about you and the bank, where can they go to, please?
the best place is probably our website, BayVanguardBank.com. It also provides how you could contact us via email, phone, and we'd be happy to serve the banking needs for any of your listenership. Like we talked about, we bank across all various industries, nonprofits, government sector, and I think your listenership would be pleasantly surprised at how easy we make the banking experience.
That'll be great. Thank you so much, Tim, for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for the time.
Of course. Take care.
You too.